Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing with you my winter reading recommendation. So I think winter is like the perfect setting for very atmospheric reads, whether they take place in cold settings or just very immersive. I think winter is just the perfect time to get cozy by the fire and read on like a dark winter night. So these are books that are kind of all over in terms of genre that I think would be perfect to read during this time of year. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting up, I first have a thriller, and it is Mean Streak by Sandra Brown. This is a book that I read a few years ago now, but it's one that has very much stuck with me, and it takes place in like a cold time period. So it follows this woman who is a doctor, and she ends up taking a vacation in a mountainous region like the Smoky Mountains. She goes for a run and wakes up with a head injury, and she is in this cabin where this mysterious man lives there, and he seems to be the only person within like 2 square miles with like there's no neighbors, no nothing. It's just him in his cabin, and she starts to feel like something is going on. There is this man's kind of, not on the run, but he's definitely hiding. So she's trying to figure out how she ended up here and all that stuff. So yeah, I really like this one. I think it's best to kind of just not know too much about this, but just kind of immerse yourself in. And what I really like about Sandra Brown's writing is that I feel like each chapter ends on a cliffhanger. So I feel like with each chapter you just want to keep reading and reading to see what happens next. And I think that makes for a really fun and thrilling and fast-paced read, which is really good. So like I said, this one was really fun. It's definitely incredibly fast-paced, and if you kind of like fast-paced, intense reads, then I think this one would be perfect for you. Next up, I have a historical fiction, and it is Dragonfly by Leland Meacham, and this is a very in-depth, multi-webbed historical fiction. So the premise of this story is that it follows 5 OSS agents who were undercover in Nazi-occupied France, and their different stories and how everything was basically interconnected. But after the events of World War II, the person who oversaw essentially the team believed that one person passed away, but when he reads a passage in a newspaper describing his team Dragonfly, it says that everyone made it out alive, and so he's very curious to see what actually happened, if this is true, all that stuff. And so while this is going on, we follow the events leading up to what was presumed to be the death of one of the agents, and then kind of the aftermath of that. And this one was really well written, and what I really like too is that when these agents are kind of dropped into France, you can see how the lies that they have to, maintain to basically keep their cover become interconnected with all these other people that are within that same area. And I just felt very anxious reading it. It was just really suspenseful, and I was just like really invested in it, where I was like really anxious for them and getting nervous for the lies that they had to maintain. So this one I think is one I haven't heard people talk about. This I read this I think during 2020, so during kind of COVID, but it was really a fun one to kind of read and immerse myself in, especially because you're trying to figure out what is going on with these characters as well, which made it a lot of fun. So yeah, like I said, if you're looking for a historical fiction novel that you probably haven't heard anything about, then I recommend checking this one out. Next up, I have this fantasy novel that definitely took me by surprise with how much I loved it, but I think it's one just is perfect to kind of immerse yourself in when it's dark and cold outside, and it is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is one that I think it's best not to know too much about it, but it follows a man called Piranesi who lives in this kind of labyrinth style house, and it's basically told through his journal entries. And the first part kind of comes up with his like day-to-days of living within this like essentially like this world, and so you follow his day-to-day tasks of going to the ocean in one of the rooms and his friend birds and all this stuff. But then you get introduced to the only other human character, who is called the Other, and it kind of goes off from there. This is one, like I said, that is best not to know too much about, but it's also very short too, which is which is nice. It's a standalone fantasy that is pretty short, but this is one that is just so immersive, and there are really great themes here of our relationship to the world around us and that impact on us as well, and also themes of solitude. And I think, like I said, it's just best to kind of immerse yourself in it. I will say the first like 50 pages or so took me a while to get in, but once kind of the plot starts to pick up, I think that's when I was like just blown away by this world and how immersive it was, and it definitely took a twist for something that I was not expecting. So I think this is the perfect book to read on a cozy winter night. And finally, these last two books are ones that I think just have a wintry vibe to them. The first one being Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This is one that I read a few years ago over winter, and I feel like that's the perfect time to do it because I think it takes place, I want to say, in Philadelphia or someplace like that where it is like cold winter time. So we follow two sisters and we get flashbacks to them growing up, and one of them ends up becoming a heroin addict, so we follow her kind of story of what led her to her addiction. And so we follow these sisters kind of 10 years after they kind of grew up. One is a police officer, the other one is a drug addict, and so they have a bit of a falling out. But when her sister kind of goes missing, the other sister is trying to figure out what is going on, but there's also this string of murders taking place that are somehow related to addicts being killed. So her sister is very concerned for the safety of her sister because she is homeless and hasn't been, seen since. So it kind of goes off from there. This is one that I think just really has that like cold winter vibes of like early February where it's just cold and snowy and just the ground is hard and crunchy, like that kind of feeling. So on top of that too, though, you do get, in terms of like the cold atmosphere, you do get the murder mystery aspect. You get kind of the thriller mystery of what happened to the sister who is a drug addict, and then it kind of goes off from there. There's a lot of different elements that are a part of this that I just really enjoyed, and yeah, definitely I want to pick up more of this author in the future because I did really enjoy this book. And lastly, this is a historical fiction that takes place in Russia during winter time, so that is perfect, I think, to read during the winter season, and it is The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. This is one that I read that I really enjoyed. Kate Quinn is one of my favorite historical fiction authors, and this one is loosely based off of a true historical figure. So I forget her name, I always forget the names. Mila, who was a woman who enlisted in Russia's army during World War II, and she became one of the most highly decorated sharpshooters in history. And so it's interesting too because although she was this like very well decorated woman, she's kind of forgotten in history. So it follows her story throughout the war, and then we also kind of get a more present day post-war, or like kind of not post-war, but kind of to help encourage the US to become a part of the war. She was sent by the Russian government to kind of convince the US government to provide support to Russia. And so there's also this storyline where she is kind of being used as a scapegoat for a murder plot for the president that also gets connected and ties up at the end. But if you're looking for cold, nothing beats winter in Russia during World War II, and it kind of has that like cold not wooden, but like foresty feel of that side of the war, which I thought was really interesting. Although I felt like there were aspects which I was like, this is definitely like exaggerated, especially with like the president assassination subplot and the love triangle in here. I did really enjoy this. I learned a lot about kind of the science behind shooting, like being a sniper and all that, so I did learn a lot, but it also has that like cold Russian winter feeling if you're looking for that. So I think this book is a perfect book to immerse yourself in during this time of year. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what books you want to read this season and all of that fun stuff. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.